Emma Taylor discovered that, on the whole, living next door to three noisy brothers had prepared her well for surprises, just not the sort of surprise she found on the night of the first full moon of summer vacation. It was after midnight, and the house was so still she could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen like a distant spaceship. Restless, she opened her bedroom window to let in a breeze and was rewarded with the unmistakable clink of glass coming from the backyard. The Taylors had a neat suburban lawn dotted with a few tasteful ornaments: a pair of ceramic rabbits, a stone bird bath, and 6 garden gnomes that Mrs. Taylor had picked up at a charity auction. They were sturdy fellows, cheeks painted an unblushing pink, eyes forever widened in porcelain surprise, each wielding tiny tools: a rake, a lantern, or a fishing rod. Emma never paid them much attention in daylight. Tonight, though, the gnomes were missing. Missing was not entirely accurate. Surveying the moonlit yard, she realized the spots where the gnomes usually stood were now damp, empty circles in the grass. 6 blank patches of lawn, 6 absent gnomes. One jittery, wide-eyed Emma, a rational child, might have alerted an adult. Emma, however, possessed a stubborn streak and a curiosity large enough to fill her brother's sock drawer. Though, come to think of it, that drawer was always half empty. She slipped into sneakers, grabbed her flashlight, and tiptoed past the snoring chorus of her brothers. Outside, the grass felt cool between her toes. She flicked on the light and caught a flash of red hat bobbing behind the hydrangeas. "Hey!" she hissed, though why she expected an inanimate statue to respond she didn't know. Stunned, she watched the gnome scurry away on stout ceramic legs, surprisingly quiet except for the occasional clack of clay on patio stones. A second gnome hustled after the first, lugging what looked suspiciously like one of her dad's argyle socks bulging at the toe. Emma followed. Past the hydrangeas, her backyard sloped into an unruly tangle of wildflowers left deliberately for pollinators. Fireflies winked like green embers around towering hollyhocks. Halfway down the slope stood the old potting shed, derelict by day, but tonight pulsing with flickering lantern light that leaked through every crack. From within drifted a bustling symphony, clatter, chatter, and the occasional goat bleat that sounded far too tiny to belong to any normal goat. A hand-sized sign dangled over the shed door, carved from a popsicle stick. It read, "Night Market, Mind the Mulch, Open Till Sun Up." With the sort of reckless bravado that had once led her to ride a neighbor's untrained pug like a rodeo bull, Emma pressed forward. The shed's warped door swung inward on its own. Warm candlelight spilled over her sneakers, and she stepped into a space that was somehow far larger than the building's exterior should allow. Shelves rose cathedral high, heavy with jars of glowing liquid, bundles of herbs, trinkets, and oddly single socks of every pattern imaginable, fluttering like prayer flags on twine. At least 100 gnomes hustled under the vaulted rafters, each no taller than Emma's knee. Some wore patchwork aprons, others dusted spectacles perched on bright red noses. At the center of the commotion, standing on an overturned thimble as though it were a podium, was the gnome with a riotous white beard and a monocle. He pounded a tiny wooden mallet for attention. "Order! Order in the court of commerce," he declared in a voice that reminded Emma of a bicycle horn. "Remember, shopkeepers, no sales without official sugar plum receipt." Emma felt a tug on her shoelace. A gnome in a violet gown inspected her trainers with a jeweler's lope. "Human child," the gnome said, tutting. "Size 3? So small. Never mind, follow me. Tubbles and Immigration are just past the Dandelion wine stand." Despite being 3 times as tall as anyone here, Emma was swept along a bustling aisle formed by overturned flower pots. Gnome merchants hawked their wares like carnival barkers. Fresh squeezed dewdrops collected at dawn from ethically farmed spider webs. Single socks, wool, cotton, and questionably clean. Find your soulmate today, polished acorn caps, guaranteed shinier than your cousin's bald head. She tried to process it all but was distracted when a plump gnome in a newsboy cap zipped past astride a roller skating hedgehog. The hedgehog saluted with a pine cone helmet, then screeched around a corner, scattering sawdust and squeals. Her escort deposited Emma at a desk fashioned from a broken birdhouse. Behind it sat the bearded gnome she'd seen earlier, monocle glittering. He examined a ledger the size of a postage stamp. A quill fashioned from a hummingbird feather twitched between his fingers. "Name and purpose of visit?" he asked. I'm Emma," she stammered. "Purpose? Um, I heard a noise." She realized it sounded absurd. "Also, why are my gnomes alive?" The bearded gnome harumphed. "Alive? How dreadfully unpoetic. We prefer animated by the clandestine energies of the moon." "I'm Griswold Gogglesnout, chair gnome of the Night Market Guild. Welcome to the backyard free trade zone, human guest." He licked the quill and scribbled into his ledger. "First-time visitor's fee is 2 crumbs of shortbread or 1 amusing anecdote. We accept knock-knock jokes as legal tender." Emma cleared her throat and murmured a joke about a banana, an orange, and a policeman's hat. Griswold chortled, marked something down, and stamped her palm with an ink seal that smelled delightfully of cinnamon. "Enjoy the market," he said, "but remember the rules. No stepping on merchants, no sneezing near the enchanted soufflés, and absolutely no questioning the sock acquisition program." Emma considered questioning it anyway, but a bell rang overhead, a hollow sound like a teaspoon hitting crystal, and the entire shed rippled with anticipation. A pair of accordion doors swung open on the far wall, revealing an expanse of lawn that should not have been there. Somehow the inside of the potting shed led to a moonlit fairground twice the size of the tailor's property. Hung from spider silk lines, paper lanterns drifted like jellyfish. Booths built of popsicle sticks and playing cards formed avenues that stretched into the dark, each exuding its own peculiar fragrance. Warm bread, cucumber water, wet asphalt after rain. Emma stepped through. Underfoot, the grass felt springy and alive, its blades shifting color from emerald to teal under the lantern glow. Nearby, a quartet of gnomes wearing aviator goggles stirred an enormous cauldron balanced on a turtle. The liquid inside sparked like carbonated stars. "Moon Fizz soda," they chorused as Emma approached, thrusting a snail shell cup into her hands. 20-minute sugar rush guaranteed. Or your pine cones back." She looked around for payment. Seeing her confusion, one brewer winked. "First samples free to newcomers, compliments of the Hedgehog Delivery Association." Emma sipped. The soda tasted like lemon mint and the moment after you dive into a cold pool on a hot day. Tiny bubbles popped against her tongue, releasing faint whistles of tinpipe music. She giggled. Buzzing from the drink, she wandered deeper. She saw a stall selling bookmarks folded from rose petals that whispered the endings of novels if you licked them. Another hawked miniature weather, bottled breezes, toadstool thunderstorms, and snow flurries swirling inside inverted light bulbs. But the most popular booths, by far, were the sock traders. Gnomes had arranged socks, striped, polka-dotted neon, worn, newborn small, basketball player huge, in heaps that dwarfed them. Customers inspected singletons, comparing shades and elasticity, haggling with fervor usually reserved for fine jewelry. Emma felt the prickle of recognition. There, near the front, lay one of her mother's plaid ankle socks, forever missing its partner in the dryer. A handwritten tag proclaimed, "Rare domestic artifact, excellent stretch, slight toast, crumb smell. 1 dewdropped starting bid." A tiny gnome with silver pigtails stood guard. She noticed Emma staring and smirked. "Lost one of the pair, did we? Happens every time a human leaves the washing machine lid ajar. Wind spirits snatch 'em like confetti." "You stole it," Emma said, more perplexed than angry. "Why socks?" The trader rolled her eyes. "Supply and demand economics, kid. Gnomes use socks as sleeping bags, tea cozies, or luxury sleds in winter. Plus, we're extremely single-footed. Pairs are wasted on us." Emma wondered if she could reclaim the sock for her mom. Before she could ask, a horn blared, the sound of an outraged trumpet squeezed through a straw. A hush fell. From between 2 booths marched a 2-inch tall figure, clad in a waistcoat made of postage stamps. He wore a badge shaped like a thimble. Behind him trudged a platoon of beetles, harnessed to a matchbox wagon packed with scrolls. "It's the tax inspector," someone wailed. "Hide your luxuries," cried another. The inspector raised a quill like a rapier. "Unlicensed import duties on synthetic textiles," he barked. 50 acorn caps per sock, payable immediately." Panic ensued. Merchants stuffed wares under toadstools, customers bolted, lanterns swung wildly. A gnome sprinted past Emma hauling a bin labeled contraband, fluffy slippers. In the chaos, Griswold Gogglesnout reappeared, monocle askew. "Emma," he said, seizing her sleeve, "we need a distraction, or the inspector will confiscate the whole market. And without the market, the gnomes will be forced back into boring statue duty for a century. Have you any human tricks up your sleeves?" Big sleeves, those are luxuriously roomy. Emma's mind raced. At home, her dad kept a battery-powered leaf blower in the garage, but she doubted she could lug it here in time. Then she looked at her moonfist cup, still bubbling faintly, and remembered something her science teacher had said about carbonation and pressure. "Do you have a straw?" she asked. Moments later, equipped with a bendy straw repurposed from a hummingbird feeder, Emma plunged it into the cup, covered the top with her thumb, crouched behind a stall, and took aim at the inspector's scroll wagon. She lifted her thumb. A jet of fizzy starlight shot forth, striking the wagon's wheel. The scrolls erupted, tinny fireworks of parchment twirling like confetti. The beetle spooked, bolted, dragging the wagon in circles. Gnomes cheered. A merchant released a flock of origami cranes that dive-bombed the inspector, pecking at his hat. Someone started to chant, 2, 4, 6, 8, our sock tax, we won't inflate. The inspector, overwhelmed, retreated beneath a portable umbrella and scurried toward the exit, crying, "I shall return with an invoice, a very stern invoice." He vanished in a puff of bureaucratic indignation. Relief swept across the market. Griswold summoned Emma back to the main thoroughfare, where vendors resumed their sales with renewed gusto. "Heroic work, human," he said, handing her a stamped token shaped like a walnut. "Good for any single purchase, no exploration. You've the gratitude of the guild." Emma's gaze drifted to her mother's plaid sock, still resting on the trader's table. "Can I have that?" "Indeed," Griswold replied. "One token covers it." He bowed, then sauntered off to settle disputes over whether toe socks counted as 5 individual units or 1. The silver pigtail trader plucked the sock from display and presented it to Emma with a theatrical flourish. "Use it well," she said. "Makes a lovely puppet if you add googly eyes." Emma stashed the sock in her pocket. She sensed dawn's approach, the lanterns dimmed, the air cooler, the energy of the crowd shifting from raucous to reflective. A bell chimed again, slower this time. "Closing time," Griswold announced from atop a suitcase. "Pack up your wares, folks, and mind the first raise." The bustle reversed itself. Stalls collapsed into suitcases, lanterns folded into matchbooks, and merchandise vanished into pockets, pouches, and the occasional squirrel-drawn carriage. Emma watched, entranced, as the entire fair dematerialized like dew under the sun. Within minutes, she found herself once more in the potting shed, now perfectly ordinary, dusty, and quiet. 6 gnomes lined up beside her, rigid and statue still, faces ready for dawn. But before they froze completely, Griswold winked. "Same time next month, human. Spread the word only to those who believe in improbable bargains." Emma pressed her palm to his tiny clay hand. "I'll be there." In the weak pre-dawn light, she tiptoed back to the house. Inside, she tucked her mother's recovered sock into the laundry basket. Before climbing the stairs, she drained the last of her moon fizz. The bubbles tasted tired but triumphant. Morning came as if nothing had happened. Over pancakes, Mrs. Taylor exclaimed, "Well, look here." My missing sock turned up. She eyed her daughter with suspicion. "You wouldn't know anything about this, would you?" Emma shrugged innocently. Maybe it wandered home. Her brothers argued about whether the maple syrup smelled like feet. Her father scanned the newspaper for lawn care tips. Nobody noticed the garden gnomes outside, now back in their usual places, except perhaps for a faint cinnamon scent lingering in the crisp air and the crooked tilt of Griswold's monocle that hadn't been there yesterday. The next few weeks passed in a blur of typical summer mischief. Bike rides, ice cream trucks, and Emma's secret smiles whenever she spotted a lone sock on a clothesline, knowing exactly where it might end up. She created a small box beneath her bed, storing items she planned to trade at the next market. A broken video game cartridge, 3 stale marshmallows, and a witty pun she'd been refining. When the August full moon arrived, Emma was ready. She rose at midnight, pocket bulging with offerings, only to find the 6 gnomes already sliding off their plinths, stretching stiff joints. Griswold tipped his hat. "Evening, Madame Distraction." "Evening, Chairman Monocle," she replied, savoring the giddy thrill of being in on a secret. They marched toward the potting shed. This time, Emma noticed fresh placards advertising new attractions. Dance-O-Off at midnight, win a Sparkle Spix Pebble, hot new flavor, raspberry rhubarb moon fizz, and her favorite storytellers wanted payment in socks or sincere applause. But right beside those was a new sign that made her pause. Humans now welcome to sell authentic daylight memorabilia. Slightly chewed pencils, homework excuses, glitter from craft projects. See Petunia Pickle Flint for booth reservation. As the gnomes busied themselves building the night's market, Emma felt a gentle tap on her ankle. Petunia Pickle Flint, she recognized the violet-gowned gnome from her first visit, looked up with sparkling eyes. "Interested in a vendor's license?" she asked. "We take a 10% cut and offer unbeatable foot traffic." Single-footed, of course. Emma knelt, producing her stash. "Will these do?" She displayed the cartridge, marshmallows and pun jotted on a slip of paper. "What do you call cheese that isn't yours?" "Nacho cheese." Petunia clapped, impressed. "Delightful! Marshmallows are exotic imports around here and jokes always sell. We'll set you up between the acorn butter stand and the ladybug taxi rank." Under the lantern's rising glow, Emma arranged her humble booth, while gnome patrons drifted in. A pair of elderly gnomes bought the marshmallows to cushion their wicker rocking chairs. A youngster traded a lens polished from a dragonfly wing for the broken cartridge, apparently perfect for scraping burnt crumbs off mushroom toasts. And the joke? It went for 3 dewdrops and half a sock shaped like a chili pepper, which Emma planned to gift her elementary school librarian, who adored quirky bookmarks. As the night carried on, Emma discovered that the market was more than economics. It was a grand exchange of joy and mischief, a reminder that the world was full of hidden corridors of wonder if only you stayed curious, and maybe kept an eye on your laundry. Close to dawn, Griswold visited her stall bearing a burlap pouch. "Your commission," he said, pressing it into her palms. Inside were 3 crystalline dewdrops, each shimmering with the memory of a sunrise yet to happen. Spend them wisely. 1 drop can revive a drooping flower, sweeten an oversteeped cup of tea, or convince a grumpy sibling to share their last cookie. Emma thanked him, feeling the gentle heartbeat of magic in the pouch. "See you next month," she said. "Or sooner," Griswold replied with a conspiratorial grin. "The world turns faster than humans think. Socks don't steal themselves, after all." He turned, joints already stiffening. The lanterns extinguished one by one. The fairground folded back into ordinary space. The potting shed returned to dusty silence. A dawn breeze carried the scent of cinnamon as Emma stepped onto the grass. She glanced at the gnomes frozen in place, tool in hand, expressions benign, and realized she no longer saw statues. She saw friends mid-sentence, paused until moonlight pressed play again. Inside, Emma tucked the dewdrops beside her alarm clock where dawn light could refract through them and cast rainbows on her ceiling. She crawled into bed just as the first birds chirped, her heart humming. Somewhere outside, socks rustled in the breeze, plotting their nighttime escape, and Emma, dreamer, entrepreneur, honorary gnome ally, drifted to sleep, knowing that every mundane corner of her world held a secret door. Somewhere a market was setting up, ready to barter laughter for lint, sunrise for Velcro, and dewdrops for stories yet unwritten.